Okay, cell cycle notes. Pause as you need. Okay, and your notes do not have this arrow, and that's all good. Just know that interface, that indicates an interface, includes the G1, the S, and the G2 phases. You should have little labels over here and just drag them over. So G1 phase, the S phase, the G2 phase, those are again all part of interphase, the M phase, and cytokinesis. So basically there are three parts to the cell cycle. Interphase, which has three subparts, M phase, which has four subparts, and cytokinesis. So the G1 phase, growth and development. So that is when the cell gets bigger and gets ready for um, to grow and get ready for cellular division later. The S phase is the synthesis, making a copy of the DNA. The G2 phase is growth and synthesis of organelles and spell checking our DNA. Just like when you copy notes, you may not always copy them exactly. And so this is the chance for them to go through, and the cell goes through and double checks the DNA to make sure there are no mistakes. And the M phase is mitosis, which is the division of the nucleus. And then cytokinesis is the division of the cytoplasm. So it's the division of the cytoplasm. Okay, so interphase is the longest of our phases. It includes the G1, the S, and the G2, and it includes the growth and synthesis of the DNA. Now, when we see these questions about interphase on your STAR test, what you need to know is that the S phase is where the DNA is copied. That's where we have synthesis of DNA. And the G2 phase is where we spell check that DNA. The questions that I've seen over the last several years have all come from those three things: that it is the longest phase, that the DNA is synthesized during the S phase, and that G2 is where it's spell checked. Okay, so interphase is one of our phases, which we talked about a second ago. It includes the G1 phase, the S phase, and the G2 phase. The next phase is the M phase. So all of this is the M phase. And remembering back to your days in biology, you probably learned "pass me another taco." So prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. So prophase, the nucleus dissolves. Sorry, I can't spell. Dissolves and then the centrioles begin to move to the poles. So these little green things start to move to the poles. They move to either end. Metaphase, the chromosomes line up at the equator or in the center, and the spindle fibers begin to form. So these are spindle fibers. And remember, in the S phase, we made a copy of our DNA. So we have two copies of our DNA in the cell right now. And so they line up in what's called analogous pairs. So that's pairs of the same, that code for the same thing, line up together. And this helps ensure that each cell that we're creating winds up with the exact copy of the DNA. So during anaphase, the chromosomes are pulled apart. and the spindle fibers are shortening. So as those fibers shorten, then it pulls those chromosomes apart. So each cell winds up with one complete set. And then during telophase, um, the nucleus reforms. And then last is our last phase, and that is cytokinesis, and that is a pinching in of the cytoplasm. So the cellular membrane slowly pinches in, pinches in, pinches in until we have two cells. Uh, the questions, the type questions that you're likely to see from this information, you should be able to identify what's happening in each of the pictures. Most of the questions I've seen, they show a picture and they ask what's happening here. And know that anaphase is where we make sure that each cell has its own set of chromosomes. Um, Beyond that, I have not seen where they ask you to put it in order since before star. Um, but if you can remember, pass me another taco, you're in good shape. Um, and that cytokinesis is the division of the cytoplasm. Again, most of the questions I've seen in the last 5 or 6 years have more to do with looking at the picture and identifying what's happening during the picture. Um, so again, out of this material, 3 questions that almost always in some form show up. Something about whether that the S phase is synthesis of the DNA. Interphase is the longest cycle. Be able to identify what's happening in each of the pictures. If you can get that information down, then you are good for another 2 or 3 questions on your test. Thank you.